Hello and welcome to my channel. I went to lose gaming. We're going to be doing a quick guide on the Raiden Shogun. She is back. She has her rerun banner available now for you guys to pull on, and I'm certain a lot of you guys are probably going to pull on her. She is an amazing character, and I'm sure you guys are also going to be shocked to learn that this video is going to have quite a bit of math involved. I know, absolutely stunning in a video of mine. I think most of you guys know really the basics of her stuff, like her kit and what it does, but I will kind of blitz through it real quick. Her normal attack does physical damage, and yeah, there's nothing really else to say about her normal attack. You can run some meme Crescent Pike builds, but yeah, I mean, you know, it's just not really the best option. Her elemental skill is interesting because you can cast it, and it does an initial electro tick, which is 234.4% damage, and then so her elemental skill has standard ICD on the coordinated attack ticks. They have a 50% chance to generate one particle on each coordinated attack, and it has a 10-second cooldown, 25-second duration. And finally, it doesn't tick on Abyss Mage and Lecter shields, so it must do damage in order to tick, and as such it's not the best option for depleting Abyss Mage shields or Lecter shields. And also importantly, it adds some bonus elemental burst damage. And here I have this chart. We can see it's obviously just very simple. You should bring this up to level 9, at which point it should be at 0.3% per energy elemental burst damage bonus. We can see in this chart, 40 energy cost gives a 12% energy burst, and an 80 energy cost burst gives you a 24% energy cost burst. And this applies to any member in your party. So Raiden casts it, only uses his meteor, he's going to get the elemental burst damage bonus. For Raiden herself, since her burst costs 90 energy, this thing gives her a 27% additional bonus burst damage. And yeah, let's actually go take a quick look at it. But you can dash cancel, you can jump cancel it, and it will appear. And you can also switch out of it very quickly. So it's a very, very low, or very quick cast time, and you know, very low commitment to utilize. Okay, next let's talk about her burst. Her burst is pretty complicated, but I'm gonna go through it pretty quickly. I think most of you guys know how it works, but if you don't, then hopefully this explanation will help. So it has the initial, okay, why don't we actually just use her burst real quick. When we use her burst, she does her, you know, in my opinion, one of the best burst animations in the entire game. And the initial slash there is the big multiplier that, you know, we'll see in once we go back to her character talent page. Okay, so we are at her elemental burst. As we saw, she did an initial slash and she had some sword infused electro attacks. There are two ways that Raiden can gain resolve. The first way is through her passive, where when anyone in your party grabs an energy particle, you gain 2 resolve and it has a 3-second cooldown. And the second way is by using Raiden's teammates' bursts, which gives up to 0.2 resolve per energy spent on that character's burst. There we can see a simple chart that shows the amount of resolve that you gain in Constellations Sara when your party members use their burst. And finally, she can have a maximum of 60 resolve. And each resolve adds skill multiplier to her burst damage. So for example, with 0 resolve she does 852%, and then with 60 resolve she does 852 plus 60 times 8.26, which is 1347.6% skill multiplier damage. And the same applies for her normal attacks and charge attacks, but do keep in mind that this multiplier that goes in 1.54 times 60 is added to each individual hit. So this 4-hit damage combo, which has 2 hits, that means that it is added to each individual hit, and really you're kind of double dipping in that sense. It applies to the charge attack as well. In the end, having around 60 resolve will give her basically 58% additional damage, which is a lot, right? That's a lot of additional damage. So you do want to be using Raiden with a lot of resolve. Her resolve is indicated. Okay, so right now we don't have the ring around her, but let's go ahead and get the ring around her real quick by grabbing an energy particle. And we can grab an energy particle by obviously just generating an energy particle real quick. So now she has this ring around her, which indicates that she is starting to build resolve. And obviously you can grab a lot of particles to get some resolve. That takes a long time, but really the most reliable and better way to generate resolve is by using your party members' bursts. Using Beta's burst. But now we can see that the ring has some additional shiny lights on it. Let's use Fischl's burst. And now we can see how the ring is, kind of reaching its end there, and it's about to be full. That explanation took way longer than I would have liked. So anyway, now that you are in burst mode, it lasts for 7 seconds, but that's deceptive because her burst animation casts, and that lasts a little bit of time. And then after her burst animation finishes, that's when the 7-second duration actually starts. So once you press the Q button, it's actually around 8.5-ish seconds that the burst technically lasts for, I guess. And one more thing about her burst, there's just so much to talk about with her burst, is that she provides energy restoration for the entire team when she hits things with her ability, or when she hits things with her burst. And here we can see energy can be restored this way once every 1 second when she hits an enemy. So the base amount of energy restored to the entire team with 5 procs of this is 12.5, and then this is multiplied by her second passive, which gives her 0.6% greater energy restoration from Musho Ishin for every 1% over 100% energy recharge. If we take a look at my Raiden, she has 289% right now. She actually has more when she uses her burst. So if we actually look at her weapon, which gives 50% additional energy recharge. So what this means is that she is at 339% minus 100. Let me just do that math real quick. So after factoring this passive, basically for my Raiden Shogun and this current build, she gives her entire party 30.455 energy, which is a lot of energy. That's half of Bennett's entire burst just by hitting things a few times during her burst. An incredibly powerful passive, and it also gives additional electro damage bonus. So in my Raiden's case with 330 something, 339.4. An additional 95.76% electro damage bonus. So in other words, you're highly incentivized to build her with energy recharge because of all the benefits that she gets from it. Whew. Okay, we can finally move on from the basics of the Raiden Shogun. We talked about that for so long. So let's just talk about her artifacts. There is no close second option for her. There's only one option, that is the Emblem of Severed Fates. That's it. No need for a guide on that. But let us talk about the main stats and substats. So really, in terms of the attack percent goblet versus an electro damage goblet, both of them are pretty viable. I recommend using whichever one you have is way better than the other, or is significantly better than the other. And in terms of, her circlet, just crit damage or crit rate, depending on if you want to crit fish for a nuke or if you want a more balanced, higher sustained DPS build with her. Timepiece, it's super simple, straightforward. Just go with an energy recharge timepiece. And in terms of substats, crit rate, crit damage, energy recharge in that order. Crit rate, crit damage being, whichever one better balances out your crit stats, or, whichever one fulfills your desired purposes for your crit stats. And finally, after those three, we have attack percent is decent too. It's not a waste. And after that, we're starting to get into really much worse options with like flat attack or something like that, right? All right, now we can get into something more interesting, and that is this weapon chart. The baseline for this weapon chart is going to be the Catch, which is one of the best free-to-play weapons in the entire game, especially with the advent of the Emblem of Severed Fates. And finally, with the characters like the Raiden Shogun as well as Xiangling, the Catch is a ridiculously good weapon for free-to-plays. And in case you don't know how to catch the Catch, I did make a tutorial video on that. Link might be in the description below. But basically, you have to catch a ton of fish. Highly recommended, as it is completely free-to-play accessible, and it is only gated by your patience, sanity, and time. Since the Raiden Shogun's burst is all considered burst damage, every single hit, even these normal attacks and charge attacks within it, these are all considered burst damage when they hit the enemy. That means that this buffs it essentially unconditionally for the Raiden Shogun. And it having 12% crit rate also makes it easier to build her around. So for example, we can see here, her actual crit ratio here is 75.3% and 154.9% after adding in the 12% crit rate. Let's talk about her signature weapon, the Engulfing Lightning. Now, the Engulfing Lightning is a substantial boost to the Raiden Shogun. Here in this chart, in a damage maximized calculation and stuff, we can see that in a vacuum with no other teammates, the Raiden Shogun is doing 26% more damage with a Refinement 1 Engulfing Lightning, because the Engulfing Lightning provides a ton of attack based on her energy recharge, where she's building a ton of energy recharge. And because attack is often a stat that you're missing on the Raiden Shogun without the Engulfing Lightning, it really patches up that specific multiplier. So yeah, you're going to gain a ton of attack with this weapon. If we actually look at my Raiden Shogun, we can see with the Engulfing Lightning equipped, she's at 2433, and this is not even when she's using her burst, which she gains a little bit more attack. If we compare that to the catch, she's at 1,317, right? So we went from 2,400 to 1,300. That's a huge difference in terms of the amount of attack she gains. Now, the good news, though, is that when it comes to party buffs, attack is the most common buff. So you do have, comparatively diminishing returns for attack in comparison to other things like defense shred, as well as resistance shred. In Raiden's case, she also has a ton of bonus damage too. So, things that boost bonus damage for your party aren't as good on her as compared to many other characters. But yeah, either way, Engulfing Lightning, an incredible weapon. At Refinement 5, it's doing 66% more damage, a colossal amount more damage than the catch at that point. Now let's talk about some other options. We do have the Skyward Spine. The Skyward Spine is basically almost the exact same as the catch. You do attack a tiny bit faster, but it's pretty hard to notice. But yeah, it's worth noting you might be able to squeeze out an extra normal attack in the attack string at some point. Now, I haven't personally really tried this, but yeah. So anyway, Skyward Spine, it's a reasonable catch substitute. Does almost the exact same amount of damage as the catch. And for example, if you have Xiangling and you have the Skyward Spine and you have Raiden, you want to use them all in the same team, you can give either the catch or the Skyward Spine to either of the characters and they will do great. Next weapon we're talking about is the Favonius Lance. Now, I guess you can use a Favonius Lance if you don't have the catch yet, or if you don't have the Skyward Spine as well. Favonius Lance is nice because it definitely generates the most energy for the entire party in comparison to the other options because of the white particles it generates, which is quite a lot of energy. Now, in terms of the other weapons, I only really bother doing the math for the deathmatch, but it's really just to demonstrate a point. And we can see that in terms of the damage that it actually does, it does okay damage, but it's missing that energy recharge. And as we saw, the energy recharge adds a ton of utility for Raiden. It increases the amount of energy she generates for the team. It increases how much bonus damage you get from the Emblem of Severed Fates. And it also increases Raiden's own ability to have her burst up. So in terms of any other weapon that does not have energy recharge, that's a polearm, I'm just giving them all two slime ratings across the board because really they're just not recommended for a character like the Raiden Shogun. Okay, now let's get into the actual interesting stuff in my opinion about this video, and that is probably what a lot of you guys are considering with this rerun. That is some of her constellations. Let's talk about her constellations. Let's also talk about whether or not the Engulfing Lightning is worth it, as well as what you can expect while you pull on the Raiden Shogun's banner, which by the way has both Bennett and Sara on it. Okay, so do keep that in mind. That's an incredible banner right there. Anyway, her Constellation 1 adds additional resolve when other characters use their elemental burst, 20% for non-electro characters, and 80% additional resolve for electro characters. So if we look at this chart, we can see here that I'm making the assumption that we have 80 electro energy from her party members and 120 other elemental energy from her party members. Now, let's assume that the party is, for example, Sara, Bennett, and Kazuha. Now, I didn't add Bennett's and Kazuha's buffs into this, but we can assume that all of them use their bursts. That's how we get these baseline energy resolve calculations. Now, at talent level 9, we are getting 40 resolve just by using all 3 of their bursts at Constellation 0. And actually, before we dive into that, let's talk about... I did want to include Sara's math in this because we'll also be factoring in how much damage you gain while you get Constellation on Sara. So, at Constellation 0 with the catch of Refinement 5, here we can see that she is doing 63,325 average Q damage on the initial slash. And once we add Sara into that formula, she is doing 34% more damage. And this is the baseline, is Raiden plus a Constellation 0 Sara's buff. Okay, now with that out of the way, let's talk about our Constellation 1, how much damage it actually adds. In a typical rotation, which is at the beginning of an Abyss Chamber, you will start with 0 resolve when you hop into the Abyss Chamber. However, you can use your 3 supports bursts, and then you will get a bunch of resolve from it. Now that's really when this Constellation is the most valuable, because in the overworld it's like whatever, who cares. But in Abyss, you will gain an additional 16.72 resolve from your party members from Constellation 1. And this ends up being a 12% increase to her burst damage right out of the gate for Abyss 12. Now, because it is situational to just Abyss 12 and because it's not a huge damage gain, it's only 12% in this situation, I'm giving this one a 3.5 slime out of 5 slime rating. We are at Constellation 2, which is literally one of the best constellations in the entire game. This is a constellation that is better than many characters' Constellation 6s. Like, I'm talking, for example, Yaimiko, her Constellation 6 is the same as Raiden's Constellation 2, which is absolutely crazy. But if we look at this chart, we can see that this shreds 60% of the enemy's defense, and this increases her burst damage just flat out by another 43% damage on top of her Constellation 1. So in total, you are now doing 60% more damage in comparison to a Constellation 0 Raiden just by getting her Constellations 1 and 2. And this is an incredible constellation, easily deserves a 5 slime rating out of 5 slimes. The next one is a very simple +3 talent level on her Elemental Burst. And here we can see that going from talent level 9 to 12 based on this chart increases her damage by 18% on top of her Constellation 2. So by Constellation 3, you are now doing nearly twice the amount of damage as you are in comparison to a Constellation 0 Raiden. So this constellation is essentially an unconditional buff to her burst damage, unlike Constellation 1, which is, more conditional and a smaller buff. So I'm giving this constellation a 4.5 star rating because any additional damage you stack on top of Raiden's Constellation 2 pushes her damage above and beyond. So now let's talk about what if you get Constellation 5 Sara, because you're going to be pulling on this banner, and obviously Sara is also on this banner, and Sara, I'm going to throw her in my party real quick, that way I don't have to scroll a million miles just to click on her. There we go. So Constellation 5 Sara adds 3 levels to her elemental skill, which adds basically does the same thing as Bennett's attack buff, where it takes her base damage, multiplies it by, in my Sara's case, 91%, and adds it onto Raiden's attack stat. So bringing Sara from Constellation, to Constellation 5 will now increase Raiden's damage by another 5%. Now keep in mind that this has diminishing returns with other attack buffs like Noblesse Oblige, as well as Bennett and Freedom Sword from Kazuha, etc, etc. But this is still just a nice little bonus for Raiden's damage, and I'm giving this a 2.5 slime rating out of 5 slimes because any amount of damage we gain on Raiden's burst is welcomed. But now what if you get Constellation 6 Sara on your journey to getting Constellation 2 or Constellation 3 Raiden? Well, now we have an additional 60% crit damage, and on top of the previous stuff, now Raiden is doing an additional 22% damage, which is, it's starting to get crazy. So by Constellation 6 Sara, you are now doing 240% of a Constellation 0 Raiden with a Constellation 0 Sara. We can start to see how this banner is incredibly valuable for your account. And now let's actually talk about what if you get the Engulfing Lightning from the weapon banner, and let's say you upgrade from the catch. So the Engulfing Lightning, as we saw in the previous weapon chart, does a ton more damage, but do keep in mind that once you start stacking on other attack buffs, we will heavily dilute the bonuses gained with the Engulfing Lightning. And in this case, even with just Sara's buff, not even factoring Bennett's and Kazuha's buffs, which would further diminish the gap, Raiden should be doing around 18% more damage in comparison to if she was using the Refinement 5, the catch. So this is still obviously a very good gain, and we're now pushing Raiden's damage into whale levels of damage with a Refinement 1 Engulfing Lightning plus a Constellation 3 Raiden with a Constellation 6 Sara. So you can easily see how this is going to snowball and just continue to turn her into an insane DPS character. And let's say you are a whale and you get your Engulfing Lightning to Refinement 5, you're now gaining an additional 29% damage on top of a Refinement 1 Engulfing Lightning. So rewinding a little bit to the Refinement 1 Engulfing Lightning, we can see that with the Refinement 1 Engulfing Lightning, she's basically doing 3 times the amount of damage as a Constellation 0 free-to-play version of Raiden. And finally, at Refinement 5 Engulfing Lightning with a Constellation 6 Sara, she's now doing 3.62 times the amount of damage as a Constellation 0 Raiden with the catch. So we are getting into crazy amounts of damage. But You know, that's the thing is that, in my opinion, just going for Constellation 3 Raiden at maximum is more than enough to annihilate everything in this game. It's more than enough. So now let's talk about her Constellations 4, 5, and 6. Adds 30% attack for the rest of the party. It's nice, it's okay, but like if you run a Hyper Raiden team, it's not really that impactful, but it is good for example, Yai Miko if you run Yai with Raiden, or Eula if you run Eula with Raiden. There are other situations where it's okay, but I'm giving this just a 3 slime out of 5 slime rating. And finally, we have Constellation 5. This makes her elemental skill do a tiny bit more damage, just a 1.5 slime rating out of, 5 slimes. And finally, we have Constellation 6. This one is a nice quality of life for speed running because oftentimes you have 20-second cooldowns. You can reduce them down to 18 seconds, so you have to wait 2 less seconds per speed run, which adds up to a lot of time and your life saved. But besides that, I guess it's okay for multiple rotations too, but not really something that's that impactful. So because of the quality of life, I'm giving this a 2.5 slime out of 5 slime rating. So really we can see that Raiden's Constellations, honestly, you should really just strongly consider up to Constellation 3, and everything else is just, kind of a nice little bonus. Okay, so I covered, what I think was the most interesting part of this video, but I guess we can talk about some team compositions. This is my favorite team composition, with Raiden. I like Hyper Carry Raiden a lot, and just a fun fact, I was one of the first and only advocates, as far as I'm aware, on the English side of YouTube that was promoting Hyper Carry Raiden at the beginning. I know the theory crafting community and many other guide makers were calling Raiden trash because she didn't work with Beto and because her damage was only at Xiao levels, right? Whatever, that's in the past now. I think people have realized just how insanely good Raiden is, and she is, going to be, if Raiden becomes bad, it's either because of some unique mechanics and make her bad, or electro-resistant enemies, or it's going to be some insane power creep in terms of what the other characters will end up going through. And we have yet to see that in Genshin Impact, so you can expect Raiden to be good for a long time. But anyway, this is Hyper Carry Raiden. The idea behind this team is to just do as much damage as you can with Raiden herself. We have had tons of world records set with this team. We have had incredible performances from free-to-plays using this team. We've had incredible performances with Dolphins as well, and now many free-to-plays can actually get her to Constellation 2 or even Constellation 3 with this rerun. So we're going to be seeing Raiden dominate more and more because more people are going to have her cracked, and it's going to be incredible. For Constellation 0 Raiden, admittedly this team is not as powerful, but it's still quite viable. I've seen many Constellation 0 Raidens with the catch even hit up to, I think, 300k nukes, which is actually very impressive. So do keep that in mind that this is still an incredibly powerful team across all levels of play. Now, a more popular free-to-play team which requires overall less investment into, any of the pretty much all the characters involved. So here we have the Raiden National Team. This has been incredibly popular for free-to-plays, ever since Raiden's release. This is actually the more commonly seen team, as she basically batteries the entire team, right? We already know that. And she batteries Bennett and Xiangling, the super energy hungry Xiangling, and she also batteries the super energy hungry Xingqiu. And what's great about this team is really its ease of use. In comparison to, for example, a child variant, Raiden National has super armor, and she also batteries the entire team, so it is super straightforward and easy to use this team. You cast Xingqiu's burst, then you cast Bennett's burst, and Xiangling's burst, and Raiden's burst, and then you just wail on stuff for 7 seconds. You do a ton of vapes, and you do a ton of over vapes, and things just die, and everything is hunky-dory. Raiden has super armor, as I mentioned. You have healing, so just an incredibly balanced and incredibly powerful team. Now, some other interesting options is some combination of Raiden Eula plus 2 appropriate supports. You can use Bennett to buff both of them. You can use Bennett Sara to buff Raiden more than Eula. You can use Bennett and even Lisa to buff both of them. You can use Bennett Kazuha to buff Raiden and group enemies. There's, these 2 support slots are very flexible when it comes to the Raiden Eula pairing. There's another more recent pairing, which is Raiden plus Yai. Yeah, you just have a lot of flexibility. You can kind of pick and choose, these 2 as the DPS characters, and then you can mix and match the 3rd and 4th slot. For example, this is one potential option If you're comfortable running without a healer, you can do something like this. This is, you know, quite powerful for speed running, and you know, it's just a reasonably decent team. You have Yaimiko doing a lot of passive damage as well as burst. If you want healing and buffing the team, you can run Bennett, and in fact, in the current Abyss, you can even run Kokomi, thanks to Electrocharge reducing enemy resistances. So you just have a lot of options. This is actually surprisingly flexible. Raiden can really drive so many characters that, you know, it's she can fit with a lot of teams. And I've even seen Xiao mains I've seen Xiao mains run with Raiden to fill up the downtime with Xiao's burst, even though, you know, at that point Raiden, you're just better off doing more damage with Raiden than trying to shoehorn Xiao into the composition. But, you know, something like this. But I have seen this, and it's actually reasonable to run. So we can see that because Raiden is just so universal, so good, provides energy to the entire team all the time, she can actually be slotted into a ton of different teams, and she's going to do amazingly well. So yeah, I'm going to have some showcases playing as I continue to talk a little bit more about Raiden. Now, do I recommend Raiden? I think in terms of, like, she's just one of the best characters in the game. There's just no other way to put it right now. Now, will we see Raiden kind of decline a bit in terms of her power level? Probably, right? You know, that's just the way these games work. You know, obviously Zhongli is not as crazy as he was. He's still one of the best characters in the game, but, you know, he's just not quite like people are learning how to dodge, and people are learning how to abuse super armor, and a lot of characters have super armor, right? So Zhongli's not quite as good as he used to be. We've seen Venti have a serious fall from grace because now most enemies can't be picked up by Venti's tornado. So, you know, you're just way better off using Kazuha in most of those situations. Now, like I said, there are ways that they can make Raiden bad in the future, but, you know, Mihoyo's done a great job of keeping characters good and relevant even to this day. So if they ever actually end up power creeping Constellation 2 or Constellation 3 Raiden, that's a huge concern for every other character in the game as well, right? Like, we're talking Aika needs to be worried, Ganya needs to be worried, Ito needs to be worried if Constellation 2, Constellation 3 Raiden is bad. Like, you know, and not just situationally bad because of some weird event or some weird, like, mechanics, right? Some specific mechanics, like, for example, if you use a burst, you die, right? Or or if you know, can never use your burst or something, right? Like, these are weird scenarios where obviously Raiden would do terribly in, but you guys get the point. So yeah, a character that I do highly recommend, and if in terms of just pure meta, she is one of the best Primo Gem values that you can get in your entire count, especially getting her up to Constellation 2. She will obliterate the content in the game. Just farm a bunch of the Emblem of Severed Fates for her and pair her up with Bennett, which is in the banner, and hopefully you get Constellation 6 Sara by then, and throw her with an animal character, preferably Kazuha, but Sucrose can work too, and you will be very happy with your Raiden's performance, I can almost guarantee you. Okay, that about wraps up this guide video. Let me know what I missed or what you think about Raiden. Also, I regularly make Genshin Impact videos ranging from Caesar showcases, DPS showdowns, guide videos, and more. So be sure to smash the subscribe button, as it's the best and easiest way for you to support my work. Also, don't forget to like the video and leave a comment for the YouTube algorithm. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Went to Lose, signing out.